Hi, I am Sophia from the Leadership's Grand Theory podcast, and welcome back after our intermission. We have Kenneth Maxwell Nance, the founder of Leadership's Grand Theory, the long-sought-after general theory for leadership by a generation of scholars. He is a leadership scholar practitioner, scientist, with over 4 decades in the field, having led in one of the world's largest organizations. While there, he was rated at the top of the top 10% of his peers, internationally for a career. Kenneth Maxwell is highly decorated, highly educated, highly experienced, and highly concerned about the lives and livelihoods of people globally. We know his time is precious since there is a regular focus on intervening in global crises and preventing them in the future. Let's get back to the topic of today's discussion. I do not believe I ever heard of the multiple triadic relational practice in leadership. Please explain.
In leadership, the leader is involved in a complex multi-triadic relational practice that few recognized until recently. Over 93% of leadership theories explicitly overlook outputs of the critical dimension and its attributes, and thus there is no emphasis on development. A dimension called the conscience can become non-functional amidst the degradation, harm, and failure described earlier. The non-functioning or underdeveloped state is a critical factor in the multiple human-made crises the world currently experiences. If not developed and not understood, the same is overlooked and can contribute to the worst in human conduct and outcomes among those influenced in a context. In the best-trained organizations, the deficit contributes to a crisis waiting to happen as it did since 2020, with COVID-19, the fall of the Afghan government, and too many others. The leader that practices leadership has begun to develop a conscience wittingly or unwittingly. When it functions well in the practice, there is alignment, resonating with those who are influenced and/or inspired, sometimes called followers. The inner relationship of the conscience to one's cognition relates to the realized conduct. The well-developed conscience suggests the right influence, then cognitively intended and seen in the conduct of the leader. An underdeveloped conscience contributes to cognition with behavior determined by the probability of punishment or avoidance. If one determines punishment is avoidable, the worst desired or imagined conduct can result. Conscience could be developed and functional in the leader, those influenced, and within the community. Humans have innate needs, and the leader, based on the context and purpose, well considers one or more of the needs. Thus, the leader has the greatest potential to influence people. It was psychologist Abraham Maslow that set forth a theory of human needs. Influence premised on basic needs is in the realm of psychology mentioned by Tony in the interview. It was James McGregor Burns who put forth one of the greatest utterances about leadership. The leadership scholar also admitted he didn't have the background to take it further. He assembled a known list of scholars in a quest to find a grand theory for leadership. Input from the field of psychology was among the contributions of those gathered. A 3-year study examined those called leaders across 6 of 7 continents, confirming Burns' assertion with the support of over 2,000 years of literature. The conscience of humans is the common factor underpinning the assertion and the research findings. A latent variable tragically amidst 98% of the global leadership failures was an underdeveloped conscience. During the latest International Leadership Association Global Conference, a discussion surfaced in response to a question from a member of one of the largest organizations in the world. The same organization is the best funded with an imperative to develop leaders. The answer to the question was later classified as one of the gems emerging from the many presentations at the global venue. You can see the comments made from the ILA conference in Figure 1 of the newsletter. Our education system, often enough, focuses solely on cognitive development and skills, hard skills, to get learners out to the workforce to contribute to industrialization and/or an economy. Please understand this: the world has witnessed some of the most skillful, richest, and powerful people experience harm, degradation, and failure due to a specific deficit. At least one Harvard professor believes, as I do, concerning emphasis on more than cognitive skills, sometimes called hard skills. Some of his peers hold it is not their responsibility to focus on anything more than the lesson plan or subject matter. The peers do not understand social learning to know teaching takes place outside the scope of the lesson plan, while lecturing and being present. The same peers do not appear to comprehend how one of the most knowledgeable, experienced, and well-resourced accounting firms in the world failed and was associated with infamous bankruptcies during a financial crisis. There is a plan to discuss in a future article or during the LGT course how little or no skill can result in the best leadership. Relational practices continue into the context that has a community, constructions, and culture. Understanding social learning and human needs, the conduct of the one called a leader in the past could have degrading and harmful effects on the community, its constructions, and enacted culture. By Figure 2 of the newsletter, you can visualize the multi-triadic relational model, which is not often seen or understood in leadership.
Next in the newsletter, you discuss right influence and/or inspiration.
Yes, the context raises the point of willing influence. Some may seem to go along, but maybe purely for an oath taken or to help uphold the Constitution, with little to no inspiration from the one called the leader. Others may follow, only fearing the penalty one may face for noncompliance. In organizations, some do so because doing so provides an income until relocated elsewhere in the workforce. You may be familiar with a workplace attitude or disposition called intention to quit. How many of you worked or are working in organizations where the one classified as a leader is not inspirational and does not positively influence the workforce or personnel? Putting the same another way, how many of you do not appreciate the professionalism, attitude, or behavior of the one who has authority and/or responsibility over and for you, for professional reasons? In some countries, there is a profession that often operates at night. However, in a particular country, some individuals seem like followers who line up in the street waiting for a professional in a profession that is illegal in other countries. Understand this profession has no leaders who practice leadership. Clearly, those in the line are influenced or responding to internal and external factors. If the desired professional is unavailable, another is sometimes selected. Children influence parents in many ways. Would you call the influence of a young child or an infant leadership? Husbands and wives influence each other often enough, having to do with their own personal wants and/or needs. Is this leadership? In some situations, we find followers inspired by a method, style, mannerism, approach, philosophy, and other elements of interest worth emulation, but never meet the one who inspires or influences, as in the case of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with Mahatma Gandhi. There are instances where one is inspired and/or influenced by one factor and no other factors displayed by the one called the leader. The science and empirical evidence show wrong influence brings degradation and harm to communities, workplaces, and people.
Woo, wonderful. As we draw close to the end of time here together, before concluding, help us to understand how transcendence and purpose are related to LGT.
People have needs, physiological, safety and security, love and belonging, self-esteem, self-actualization, or the desire to become the best they can be. Most of the stated needs parallel other motivational theories. The order for attaining needs is not fixed. Humans can excel, exceed normal limits, and attain self-fulfillment or self-actualization when there is an alignment with one's purposes. When we consider people being 99.9% alike at the gene level and the 0.1% amounting to billions of cells associated with distinctiveness, each person has potential and purpose in life. Leadership premised on leadership's grand theory facilitates people reaching their full potential. These days you may hear a nice-sounding saying that it is not about the leader being the best, but making people be their best. The fact is, the leader, by attaining the best possible, puts forth a model that resonates with the needs described above. It is sometimes called the right example. The same contributes to reflection and potential duplication or emulation. Social learning theory can help explain this further. If the leader is not reaching for the best, how does a leader influence or inspire others to be their best? The leader knows how to attain the best while influencing and inspiring others, striking the right balance. The leader, as a human striving to attain the best, does not take away from those rightly influenced or inspired to be their best. However, in a context where nominal leaders exist, too often the needs of people are sacrificed for the seeming success, selfish and strange purposes of those called leaders. There are certainly impediments to people attaining their best, often enough in organizational contexts. It is the nominal leader, leader in name only. People somewhere along the path in life experience a deficit of basic needs, and in particular, the lack of one need facilitates the forming of neuroses. The formation of neuroses is on the rise around the world. Consider the exponential increase in the use of the related hotline in supposedly one of the most advanced nations. Leadership, premised on the right influence or the right inspiration, is needed at every level of society, thus setting forth a purpose. The term and dimension of purpose give the leader and those influenced a reason for the leadership and facilitate the sense-making of any effort. Purpose encompasses vision, goals, and objectives. The right influence and/or right inspiration frames the transcendence and purposes. Reasonable people can see the purposes of Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and Mother Teresa. The same purposes resonate with people and align with human needs. When there are purposes easily and rightly accomplished individually, there is no need for leadership in such instances. Whereas others called leaders such as Adolf Hitler, Charles Taylor, Slobodan Milosevic, Jim Jones, and other former presidents, governors, and heads of organizations who are and will be noted in history for degradation and harm inflicted. When we consider the purposes or visions of the latter, we see a vision not underpinned by the right influence and/or right inspiration causes degradation, harm, and eventual failure of the nominal leadership practice. The degradation began inside the one called leader, processed cognitively, and then appeared in the conduct. Understand, any living human called a leader, who does not hold the practice of right influence and/or right inspiration, sets a trap and snares for themselves. The same called leader becomes subject to neuroses, the law, their opposition, and the reaction of the people. Such is seen with suicide, war criminals, ousting from positions, or the revolt of the people. In the workplace there is the intention to quit, performance below potential, withdrawal cognition, perceived stress, counterproductive workplace behaviors, mistreatment, violence, turnover, and toxic culture. The moment the conduct deviates from descriptive, prescriptive, preventative, and predictive properties of leadership's new definition, they begin a walk towards failure due to the relative science, principles, and empirical evidence associated with leadership's grand theory.
Wow, we will certainly look forward to hearing from you again. Can you please provide a conclusion for all that we discussed today?
Leadership's definition tells us the what about the phenomenon, a multi-triadic relational practice. It captures all the relevant relationships. The prescription tells us how it works, of the right influence and/or right inspiration. Due to the definition, we can see where or when it works, towards transcendence and/or purposes. We also know who the leader is, one who practices leadership. If the practice is not leadership, it is another phenomenon not to be conflated with leadership. Practices such as dictatorship, authoritarianism, deception, coercion, management, various positions, or others are often wrongly conflated with leadership. Practice in accordance with the descriptive or prescriptive definitions predicts the best outcomes possible while preventing degradation, harm, and failure. Our next newsletter article will discuss the recently emerged leadership behavioral formula. Learning from just the definitions informs the practice before one enters formal leadership development training. Leadership's grand theory is simple, but not necessarily easy. One promise I can make to our audience now: if you develop your leadership practice on leadership's grand theory and maintain the practice, you will never fail as a leader. Make sure to subscribe to receive notification of the next newsletter article when published. Until next time, best wishes to you and those you rightly influence and/or rightly inspire.
Today we had with us Kenneth Maxwell Nance, leadership scholar practitioner, scientist, a top expert, who discovered leadership's grand theory. We thank him for the precious time spent with us, and we thank each of you, our listeners. We look forward to you listening next time. Until next time, reflect on what you heard today, act on what you can, and if you have any questions, reach out to Kenneth Maxwell. He would love to provide you with answers concerning the best in leadership towards the best in life. This is Sophia, goodbye.